Well, those green-haired, pierced Gen Z social justice warriors are the wokest generation, and coming after them are the generation called the Alphas, and we got to assume they're going to be even worse, right? But I went out to a football game on Friday night, and guess what? Those kids are all right. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott. And guys, so many people are saying, why are you staying in Los Angeles? My God, man, the city is just a nightmare. And it is. We have homeless people and crazy people, and we have all of this stuff. But I happen to live in a neighborhood that is a small town America. It's about 10 blocks by 10 blocks. It's been lifted out of small town Iowa someplace and plunked down in the middle of Los Angeles. Don't ask me how I stumbled upon it, but I did. So this last Friday night, I had some free time. Natasha was working on some photographs. And so I just took a short walk down to Notre Dame High School, which is a private Catholic school. And I watched the Notre Dame Knights take on the Bishop Amat Lancers. And I sat there and watched a high school football game for the first time since I was in high school. And I really had a really good time. Steve, now we have to preface this by saying this. Scott's episode was on unionized school and school districts, union teachers, and so on. The LA Unified School District, which is public schools in Los Angeles, I think is the largest public sector union in the country, and is nothing but pure evil and has done nothing but destroy the education of those kids. But these kids were going to a private Catholic school. Now, with that said, and with the clear understanding that in order to attend this school, you had to part with, I think it's about $23,000 per year per student. Pretty pricey for a high school. But with all of that said, these alphas, these young people, now these would be the bleeding edge, the eldest of the alpha generation, were just the sweetest, most normal, regular kids that I've ever seen. No piercings, no dyed hair, all out there for the football game. They were cheering, they were rah-rahing, they were a bunch of knuckleheads. They were acting like a bunch of well-behaved high school kids
having fun.
And they were having fun. It blew me away. There was a group of these kids directly in front of me, Steve. These were my kind of kids, especially. They were just a bunch of knuckleheads, and you could tell that they were like the rebels. They weren't cheering for the other team. They were doing something much more subtle than that. Whenever their own team scored a relatively minor advance, like a 7-yard gain or a first down or something, they showed unreasonable enthusiasm. They started jumping up and down and hugging each other and patting each other ahead and holding each other like they couldn't believe they'd actually done it. I thought, my God, these kids are like, they're practically boomers. I was struck, Steve, by the actual innocence of them. And I wanted to do a segment about this because we talk so often about decline and decay and so on. I mentioned this on the Strasbourg Studio show last night as we record this. And somebody mentioned that one of the things that people are noticing about the relief efforts that are going on in the Carolinas is the number of very, very young boys and men who were involved. Just large numbers of 12, 13, 16, 18-year-old boys who are out there lifting supplies and, moving sandbags and throwing, giant bags of rice onto the back of trucks and stuff. And I really think that there is a fundamental difference between this generation and Gen Z. I'm not blaming Gen Z for their appalling behavior as a generation. They didn't ask to get raised that way. But it occurred to me that these alphas are evidence of something that I've come to believe for a while now, and that is that we are well past peak woke, and that the pendulum is moving in the other direction, and I couldn't be happier about that.
I've been lucky. When I say lucky, I mean just incredibly smart and forward-thinking. When you talk about that small town life, that's what I wanted for my kids. So we moved from Colorado Springs to the town of Monument, just north of Colorado Springs, and I can't remember how many people we have in Monument now. The town's grown a lot, but it's only big enough for 2 high schools, and I think between the 2 high schools there might be 3,000 high school students total, something like that. And so I have my older son just graduated high school, and my younger son just entered high school. And there's something to be said about that small town life that isn't infested with this politicalization of everything you get in the bigger cities. I pick up my younger son one afternoon a week, and I drop him off 4 mornings a week. My wife and I kind of split the duties there. And guess what I don't see in the parking lot of this school? And I think after, a school with that few students and that many pickups and drop-offs, I think I've got a pretty good idea of what the student body looks like. And I'm not seeing a whole lot of green or blue or otherwise unnatural hair. I'm not seeing a whole lot of nose rings, which, by the way, let me go on a little aside about this.
Please.
I understand earrings. Earrings frame the face. They do what a lovely picture frame does for a nice piece of art. It adds to it by giving a little decorative something around the outside. A nose ring puts an object right in the middle of the face that then sucks your attention to that thing. That's where a thing doesn't... And it's just the most distracting thing ever. And I try to be polite. I try to have good manners. But the first time I ever saw a nose ring, I think it was actually a nose stud, was my freshman year at University of Missouri. I was taking International Relations 101. I thought that would be a fun class. And it was a fun class. And on the day of the final, I aced it, by the way. On the day of the final, they did the thing where they give everybody in the front row a stack of exams, and you take one and pass it back. I was sitting near the back just because that's when I filed in, and I've been trying to get a better look at the nicely shaped young lady sitting in front of me, and I thought, oh, she's going to pass the exams back. Here's my chance. And she turns around to pass the exam. She's got the nose stud in, and I just started laughing. My manners just went out the window. To this day, I'm still embarrassed for having done that. But I mean, this is 1987. These things were still new. Anyway, so we've enjoyed these benefits of small town life here because we are in a small town. I'm so glad that you get it where you are in your 100 square blocks of Los Angeles there. I think that's great.
Closer to 10, but...
Well, you said 10 by 10, so that's,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, sorry, sorry.
This advantage of small town life where you just don't get this politicalization of everything. In fact, my whole neighborhood, I've seen one Trump sign, and that's it for yard signs, right? This was just, it's low-key, it's quiet. We keep things to ourselves like that. And the other part is I've been very, I won't say aggressive, but I've been insistent on correcting the things that my kids might be getting taught in civics or in history. I say, oh, what'd you learn in history today? Oh, let me tell you what really happened. And I try to keep it fun, and they get a little lesson. And so I've got a couple of kids who, at the ages of 18 and 14, most days we communicate primarily through sending memes to one another and messages. And let me tell you, the ones they send me are brutal and funny and conservative as hell.
Well, as far as the nose ring goes, every time I see a nose ring, one of these, every time I see one, I just go, yeah. Scotty, these kids, they obviously had an actual education. There was, and I want to talk to you about something else too, because one of the great toxins that are out there in the world today for young people is over sexualization of everything. The idea that children could be given a phone and just the access to pornography alone, just that alone is just corrosive as you can possibly imagine, and the that age group, I was so impressed by that, and I had such a great time there. They're not children anymore. They're not adults yet. They're really in that gray area. At halftime I went to the snack bar, and there was a circle of people, and there was some commotion and so on, and I thought, oh my God, somebody's starting a fight, And what had happened was this guy had come in with a handful of flowers and presented it to this girl, and there was some kind of cheer. And the guy behind the counter said, what happened? I said, I think somebody just got engaged. He said, this is high school. I said, I don't know what else it could be. But they were hugging each other and so on. But directly in front of me, this was just so great. There was this line of like these 7 girls, and they were all just adorable. They're just really cool kids. 7 girls and this one kind of dorky guy, and he'd gotten himself a girlfriend, and he had his arm around her, and they were just sitting there kind of holding hands, arm around her, watching the football game. And you had to be there to appreciate how sweet this was, because it's not going to sound sweet coming from me. But the guy had to go down to the porta potties, down to the restrooms. He says, "Be right back." The girl went with him. The two of them are walking off. He's got his arm around her, and one of these little porcelain little girls, she must have been 14, 15. She's watching this couple walk off. And she just sits there and just barely loud enough to hear, this kid's name was Matt, just loud enough to hear, she says, "Don't f it up, Matt." and I thought, that's the only time I've ever heard a child swear and not been, like, this is for adults. I don't know. I was just very pleased. And we talked about this on our backstage show, Scott. All of the algorithms that determine what we see on the internet are not designed to present us with things that interest us. They're designed to present us with things that anger us. And so we see the worst of everything. We hear the worst of everything. We are psychologically wired to click on something that's going to make us angry because just the thumbnail or the title offends us, and we want to go see what's going on. And sitting there, I was reminded, as I'm often reminded when I leave the world of the internet and go out into the real world, where we see these Black Lives Matter riots, and we think that the country is on the verge of a race war. Then I'll go to 7-Eleven and some black guy will hold a door for me, or I'll hold a door for him, and he'll say, "Hey man, thanks, how's it going?" And things are actually pretty okay out there, Things, when you get into the actual real world, this existential despair is largely falsely generated by the lens that we are presented the world through.
And my thought exactly when you started describing this, when you have real personal contact with the outside world, you inevitably come away thinking better, unless you go out of your way to go to some crazy protest where they're burning things or something. But if you just go out in your community and just see people and go to a football game, or just hang out somewhere where people go, you inevitably come away with a better opinion. I mean, to a certain extent, every generation glorifies their own nostalgia and criticizes the upcoming generation, because we always think that we were better and in some way than they could possibly be. And I'm also reminded that anything that we have ever said that's negative about any previous generation to this alpha generation must be weighed in the balance with the idea that a little tiny glass of poison can destroy an entire town's water system. It affects everybody, and there's not as much poison out there as we think. But the fact that there is some makes us think that there is much. And so when we're watching social media things or videos and we see some bad behavior from various people, we're like, "Oh, look at that generation of people," where we would be horrified if somebody suggested that our own generation was entirely corrupt because of the behavior of my, good-for-nothing brother-in-law, or whoever we think is a bad actor that's part of that generation. So I think getting to know actual people is the core of building a country that can have an integrated social dialogue, that can have a constitutional Republican form of government, that can have community organizations that are working toward the betterment of the community, or frankly, just for sheer enjoyment, for things that people love doing. There's Jesus at one point said, a little leaven leavens the whole loaf, meaning that it's amazing when you're just a little bit of yeast and goes into all this dough, and next thing you know, the whole thing rises. And so, and yeast wasn't necessarily considered a positive in that analogy. So I think we somehow have to get a grip on our own consciousness and our own mental processing when we see things happening and say, okay, there's a guy doing something I don't agree with. However, just because he's 28 years old or whatever he is doesn't mean that his entire generation is that way. And I think if you had gone to this same football game 20 years ago, you probably would have come away with much the same feeling. You would have seen a lot of nice kids just out trying to have a good time, and maybe fewer F-bombs.
Well, this has been my major, it's not even a criticism, it's my major sort of axis of sadness towards Gen Z, is that they've been so indoctrinated that they just seem so unhappy. This whole social justice warrior thing is they're just constantly looking for injustice. I didn't see any of that with these kids. So just to wrap up, a couple of quick observations here. I know that when you're talking about that kind of money, that excludes a lot of people from being able to attend those or send their kids to those kind of schools. And you would think that you would send send a kid to a school like that because of the things that the school will put into the kid. Well, there's certainly some of that. These are some educated kids. There's some real philosophers there. When I originally got there, I sat off kind of to the side, and then I realized, I look like I'm the only person in the stadium who's on the sexual offender
You're
list.
You're a person of interest.
And maybe, maybe I should move closer to where the rest of the adults are. And when I moved in a little closer, I heard this one kid talking to his two friends. And he said, I thought we lived in a free country, man. And the other kid says, we do live in a free country, you idiot. And he says, well, if we live in a free country, then how come I have to go to school on Monday? And I thought, that's a profound argument that this child is making. But what I realized is that what these private schools put into their kids is not as important as what they keep out of their kids. That's the one thing I really learned. They were fit, and they were reaching this age where all of this stuff is starting to turn on. But I didn't see any sleazy kids. I didn't see any sleaziness at all. This was a private school, and if you can afford to send your kids to this, I would do it, because what those schools are keeping out of their heads is more important than what they're putting into them. I think that just to close, I'll say that the good guys, the home team, the Notre Dame Knights defeated the good guys, the visiting team, the Bishop Amat Lancers, by a score of 28-21. And I was watching this game, and I was thinking to myself, I'm 65 and I don't have any cartilage anymore. I know I used to have cartilage because when the doctor hit me on the knee with a rubber hammer, my leg would go up and it didn't make any noise when it did it. But I was watching this high school football game and I was thinking to myself, I'm pretty sure I could score a lot of touchdowns against these kids. My high school was one of those high schools with 2,000 class of total attendance of 2,000. Those football games were a big deal. But I think the thing I took away the most was I went to every single high school game for every year I was in high school. And I was one of those guys that got dressed up for the games and I was really into it. And if Coral Gables Senior High School lost to Palmetto or Killian that year, that was enough to depress me for months until Christmas rolled around. I'm watching the results of this high school and I thought, I could care less about the outcome of this, and this doesn't matter at all. And I realized, no, that's the thing about this age, They're not old enough yet to know, thank God, the big things to worry about. They're really concerned with whether or not the Knights are going to beat the Lancers. And the final realization I had that made me realize that there is a difference between generations is that in terms of quality. It may not be that we were better people, but we sure as hell had better music, because the cheerleaders that I saw, the two routines that they did at halftime were done to I Love Rock and Roll and Bust a Move, both of which were recorded while their parents were children. And I ought to know because I was one of them. For Steve Green and Scott Ott, I'm Bill Whittle. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time right here on Right Angle.